applying to PhD programs. In this webinar, we will go over all the aspects of the PhD application, how you can best prepare for the PhD, the essential elements of the PhD itself, and also, and most importantly, the timeline to a successful application. During this webinar, you will probably have lots of questions. Please type your questions into the question box in the webinar panel, and at the end of the presentation, we'll answer as many questions as we can. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Cynthia Wright, who is the Associate Dean for Admissions and Career Development at the Medical University of South Carolina. Dr. Wright is going to go over the parts of the PhD application as well as the timeline, and also some important points about getting ready for the PhD. Dr. Wright?
Hi, everyone. So let's begin by talking about what we mean by biomedical research, which should be, okay, here, next slide. Okay, here we go. So what we're talking about basically is the intersection of biological sciences, physical sciences, chemical sciences, math, and any other STEM orientation that is focused on improving human health and disease. And so a lot of PhDs in the biomedical sciences do something called basic biomedical research. And this is basically trying to understand at the mechanistic level how cells and tissues and organisms function, which can give us a picture of how things might go wrong in health and disease. So for example, if you know that a particular protein functions to control cell growth, you might understand that when it becomes dysregulated, it might control cell growth aberrantly and result in cancer, for example. For the most part, we think about this being done at the bench, as in the picture here of this young man who's sitting at his bench pipetting something. But people don't always work at the bench. Some of the biomedical research is done in computer systems. So there are people who do bioinformatics, who analyze large data sets, which give us a picture of how systems are functioning at a big level. Or epidemiologists who study populations of people to understand the prevalence of disease, which can tell us a little bit about how diseases are caused. Or people who do clinical studies, who are looking at clinical trials to understand if interventions or drugs are helping to prevent or to cure particular diseases. It's always hard work, but it's also a lot of fun. Finding something new and discovering something that might be the cure or therapy of tomorrow is very rewarding in biomedical sciences. So the kind of people that we're looking for in admissions committees for students in biomedical sciences programs have several traits in common, but a couple of them are curiosity and persistence. So are you the kind of person who is endlessly curious about how things work? Do you look at systems around you, at animals, or if you're in the lab, do you sit there and wonder about why is something happening? Do you have the persistence that it takes to be at the bench and be performing an experiment more than one time to get a reproducible answer and know that that result is going to help you to understand something in the future? These things are attitudes that people in biomedical sciences have, and as well, it's important to realize that doing biomedical research is as creative as writing a novel or as painting a picture. It takes an enormous amount of imagination to think about what's going on and to think about the next steps in performing experiments to figure out what's going on. So biomedical scientists are trained in PhD programs which occur all over the country. They can be in really large universities that have graduate schools that have students who are doing biochemical or molecular biology research, and also occur in medical schools where there are graduate programs either within or next to medical schools where students are doing biomedical research. So admissions committees are looking for students who have particular characteristics in common, some of which are personality characteristics, like the ability to communicate well. So as an undergrad, if you've gone and given posters or talks at meetings and can talk about your science, it's an important ability to be able to communicate what you found. It's important to be able to process information that you're hearing, not just memorize facts, but understand them and be able to use them to solve the next series of problems. And we're also looking for people who are have an aptitude for working with others. Science is very much these days team science. And so we work together in the lab and across labs to solve problems. And so it's important to be collegial and to enjoy working with other people. We're also looking for applicants who have, of course, excellent academic credentials. So good GPAs in the sciences and good GRE scores. Every graduate school is getting applicants who have excellent academic credentials. And so if you are sitting at a very low GPA, you should realize that you need to work now to bring your GPA up to be a competitive applicant for graduate programs. You should be taking advanced coursework in the sciences. Courses like biochemistry, molecular biology, even calculus will be helping you to be prepared for the coursework that you will take in graduate school. And most importantly, we're looking for students who have had substantial research experiences. And we'll talk more about that later on. But basically, we're looking for students who have been in a lab and who appreciate the challenges and rewards of lab work and know what they're getting into when they apply for graduate programs. So what about financial aid? As a PhD student in biomedical sciences, you probably don't need to apply for financial aid because you will most likely receive as part of your package for graduate school full tuition remission and a stipend to cover living expenses. So not only graduate school free, but it also provides you with a wage that's pretty much a living wage to support you while you're in graduate programs. So you don't have to be going into debt while you're in graduate school. Most schools will also provide you with a health insurance package and then maybe some other benefits, including travel opportunities to go to conferences to present your work. And as you see in the picture here, memberships to the university gym are often included. So, you know, any of the campus facilities that help you perform your work in graduate school will be available to you as a member of the university. So there's no one right path to go from undergraduate college experiences to a PhD program. There are some people who go directly from their undergraduate work to applying for PhD programs, and that's fine. But others may want to experience more research or just take some time to figure out if that's really for them. And so there are a variety of opportunities that you could pursue between college and graduate school, including programs, for example, at the NIH has post-bac programs that you can apply for and do research for a year or two before you apply to graduate programs. There are a variety of other research training opportunities or work experiences that allow you to work, say, in a research lab as a laboratory technician and get paid while you're getting more research experience and getting prepared to apply to graduate programs. Other students may decide to pursue a master's degree before pursuing PhD programs. That's not usually required, but it gives you an opportunity to see graduate work for a year or two before committing to a 5-year PhD program. You can take graduate courses while you're at a university at a post-baccalaureate status to see what it's like to take a graduate level course and understand if you're ready to apply for a program. And there are also programs called prep programs. These are NIH-funded training grants that exist across the country at different schools. You can go to the NIH website, and if you Google NIH Prep, you'll come to the web page that shows you all of the programs that are available across the nation. um, that support these training grants, and you can apply for a prep opportunity which would pay you to be doing research and graduate level coursework while at the same time applying for graduate programs. So once you decide you're going to move forward, before you apply to any program, you should be reading the literature and getting an idea for research areas that interest you. Attend conferences if you can, and any other web resources like this one to find out more about these programs and what they mean. Talk to people at your home institution. If there are graduate programs at your home school, talk to the graduate students. Talk to the postdocs, talk to your mentor, and find out which programs are available and how you go about finding one that's suited for you. Again, you'll need to have substantial research experiences to be competitive for a PhD program. And we will talk later in the webinar about the application process and deadlines for graduate school. Okay, so here's an actual timeline, and it's important to realize that it will take you close to a year between the time you start to apply to the time you enter graduate programs. So you should start very early to begin this process. Many schools do something called rolling admissions, and they're making decisions as they go along through their application season. The earlier you apply and get your application completed, the better the chances you have for getting a stipend and being accepted into a graduate program. So in the summer before you think you want to go, the year before you want to go to graduate school, you should begin identifying schools you're going to apply for and initiating applications. Most of these applications are online, and you can go to websites and see what the deadlines are. Most of them are in December and January. You should sign up for and take the GRE test. You might even do that earlier in the summer so that if you don't get a score that you like, you can re-prepare for and retake the GRE in time for your second set of scores to get to schools that you're applying to. You should begin requesting letters of recommendation, and Dr. Street will talk about that later. Get your transcripts in, make sure your whole package is there and available for the graduate program to look at by their deadline. In January, February, and March, most of the schools are doing their interview process. They'll invite you, if they decide to, they will invite you to interview. Most of the schools will subsidize or completely pay for those interviews so that you don't have to go into debt to visit the schools that you're interested in applying to. So in the spring, you'll be interviewing, and then there is a national deadline of April 15th by which schools, if they have given you an offer, will ask for your decision. So you don't have to reply before that. If you have been given an offer, you usually have until April 15th to decide to take it. But if you've decided earlier than that you do not want an offer, please let the school know so that they can take those positions and offer them out to other applicants. So by April 15th, you should know whether you've been accepted or not, and you should have made your decision about which school you'll be attending. And then you have the summer to prepare, and usually most schools start in August for their first year of graduate school. So when you're looking at PhD programs, how do you start to identify the schools that you might be interested in? There's several things to consider when you're thinking about this. One is the program's organization. So some graduate programs are interdisciplinary or umbrella programs where you apply to one portal, but you'll be considered by many different departments who are using that entry process to look at the applicants. Other programs are organized by department, and you're actually applying to particular departments to apply to that school. So it's up to the school and how they're structured, and up to you to understand whether you are more broadly open to different experiences where you might want to be seeking interdisciplinary programs, or whether you have really decided on a particular area of research where it might be fine for you to apply to a particular department if you are very sure of your path in science. You should be looking at the faculty on the websites of these schools that you're thinking about applying to. Look at little blurbs, read the paragraphs about their research interests, and find out who's doing what. Maybe read some of their papers to try to understand what are the strengths of each individual program. Some programs are very strong in one research area and not so much in others. So you can look at the websites and see if they have faculty that are doing, a large number of faculty doing cancer research, for example, or a large number of faculty doing neuroscience research, and get a feel for what the strengths of that organization may be. Other things to consider are whether the school supports you in other ways. So do they have tutoring services available? Is there a writing center or a coursework in grant writing, for example, that would help you to prepare grants that would support you during your graduate program and beyond? Are there cultural or social organizations that you would like to belong to that you could look for whether those are present in the community? And geographic location is obviously a concern for some people. You want to move away from where your family might, or would you prefer to stay in a particular region so that you're closer to your family and could visit more often? So to find out more about PhD programs, one wonderful thing to do is to participate in summer undergraduate research opportunities. This allows you to go to different programs across the nation in the summer and usually get paid a stipend while you're performing research on other campuses. So you can go to a couple of different schools while you're an undergrad over the summer and see what it's like to be there, to meet the faculty and the students, and get a feel for their campus and see if you might want to apply there as a graduate student. You can also conduct research at your home institution, which would allow you to get the research experience that you need, and also to network with the people who are in the laboratories where you are. Talk to the students and postdocs and the PIs who are leading the lab, and find out where they might recommend that you go to graduate school, or about programs that have strengths in different areas that they could tell you about. And finally, attend the lectures and seminars that are coming to your own school. So there will be visiting speakers attending your institution and giving talks. You can find out a lot about research that's going on in those places and networking with people who come to give seminars to learn more about experiences at other schools. So I think that's sort of the broad overview, and now I'll turn it over to Dr. Street to talk about the actual process and ins and outs of applying to graduate programs.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. So I'm excited to talk to you today about the different components and what you need to apply to a PhD program. Let's see if I can get that next slide to come up. So there are actually 5 major components to each application that you will submit. One thing you should know is that graduate programs, each individually, create their own application form. Unlike other advanced programs that you might apply for, where they have a nationwide single application, each graduate school that you apply to, and within some schools, each program will have its own application form. So when you determine the number of schools that you'll be applying to, the first thing that you want to do is find out that school's application deadline. And then the second thing you want to do is find and begin to fill out their application form. And the form will require you to fill in some information, name, date of birth, address, research experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And that basic form will be very self-explanatory. Now, the other 4 components require a little more discussion. Excuse me. So the other 4 components are the personal statement, and I'll talk about that at length in the next few slides. Letters of recommendation, which I will also have more to say in the next few slides. And then transcripts and GRE, and let's talk a little bit about those 2 right now. So you will need to send a transcript from every undergraduate institution that you've attended, as well as any post-bac work that might have earned you some academic credit, and master's transcript if that's applicable. And on those transcripts, schools will, or admissions committees will look at the classes that you've taken and how you have performed in each of those classes. The next thing that you need to consider is taking the GRE exam. And as Dr. Wright mentioned, you definitely want to have your score in hand by September or October. And often it is recommended that you actually start practicing and preparing to take your GRE earlier in the summer, the year before you, or the year that you are applying, so that you have an opportunity to repeat that exam if you feel like you're not happy with the scores that you obtained. All right, let's talk now about the personal statement. Really the core, the central, the most important part of your application is your personal statement. And what is important in order to prepare a really strong personal statement? Definitely the most important thing is that you have gained sufficient research experience so that you clearly understand what you are getting into when you join a PhD program. And as Dr. Wright said, getting those research experiences can be done in a variety of ways. Some of you may have done that by taking part in multiple summer projects. Some of you may be at institutions that have many research experiences, and you may have done research for several years in the same lab, and you may even have gone as far as carrying out a senior thesis project. And those are all excellent ways to get research experience. And the reason we want applicants to have research experiences so that they understand the challenges and frustrations that they will face as a graduate student, but hopefully they have seen the excitement and rewards that come from successful biomedical research. We also want to be sure that you're familiar with the idea of testing a hypothesis, and doing research should definitely help you become familiar with that concept. And then it is important that as you do research, you not just look at the technical things that you are doing, but work very hard to understand the big picture of your research project. So beyond the questions that you are asking in individual experiments, think about how they come together to form even bigger questions, and how the large sum of the work that you are doing can impact a larger scientific question. And finally, doing research really helps you improve your ability to communicate about your research experience through posters, lab presentations, oral presentations, and helps you have an even stronger grasp of how your research is contributing to that field of research that you are involved in. Okay. So let's talk in depth about the personal statement. So the most important thing about the personal statement is that it paints a picture of who you are. You don't have to worry about it starting with a poetic phrase or ending with a concise type of summary statement. What it should do is paint a picture of the story that tells who you are, and it should make the people who are reading it want to know more about your application, because the personal statement is often the very first component of the application that the admissions committee reads. So you need to be sure and tell them what makes you a unique candidate. Tell your story. What brought you to science? What has kept you on science? What sort of path have you followed? What awards or publications or presentations have you been able to do? Have you had non-scientific activities that have led you along the path to a scientific career? All of those aspects of who you are what make a compelling story. You can also really make your story more personal by talking about mentors who have influenced you and other experiences that have contributed to your unique scientific journey. Of course, in addition to telling the story of who you are and why you are on this path to study science, it is very important that you describe your research experiences. So you'll want to talk about what particularly you contributed to the project. What technical expertise did you master and contribute to the project? What was your role on the team? What intellectual contributions were you able to contribute to the project? And here, you again would want to mention any publications or presentations or even awards that resulted from work that you have been involved in. Each research experience that you have deserves a separate paragraph that describes that research experience. Then, to wrap up your personal statement, you would definitely want to tell the admissions committees why you are pursuing a PhD. What are your future career goals? At least what do you think they are at this point in time? And why are you motivated to earn a PhD degree? If the reason is you love science, an admissions committee will want to know a bit more than that. They'll want to know specific examples of why you love science. And finally, you should mention, or you can mention, it's not absolutely necessary, but it does add a dimension to your application. Why are you applying to this particular institution? Okay? So people might speak of the research strengths of an institution. They may speak about the ranking of an institution. They may speak of particular faculty. But it does show an additional investment of time and motivation when an applicant talks about a particular institution. One important thing about your personal statement is the more people you can ask to review it and give you feedback, the better the statement will turn out. And of course, spell checking it and proofreading it is critically important, because remember, your application is the impression that you make on the admissions committee, and so you don't want to have misspelled words. Okay. So far we've talked about transcripts, we've talked about GRE, we've talked about the personal statement, which is probably the most important aspect we've discussed so far. And the second most important component of your application will be your letters of recommendation. It is important that you know to choose professional references over social references. So the people who can write the most powerful and the most influential letters for you in the eyes of an admission committee are those people who have been your research mentors. So if you have done a summer experience and worked in the lab of a mentor, it is very important that you ask that type of person to write you a recommendation letter, because they can speak about your potential as a scientist, your creativity. They can speak about your technical expertise, all things that an admissions committee for PhD programs will be very interested in knowing about. Academic advisors and professors of classes in which you have done quite well are also good letters of recommendation. But for them to be powerful, those people will have to know your interest in science, what your career goals are. And so it will be, in all of these letters will involve a relationship with those people. Letters from people who are more senior in their position will have more weight and more credibility for an admissions committee than people who are very junior at an institution. Let me just give you an example. If you do a summer experience and you work every day with a senior graduate student, at the end of the summer, if you want a letter of recommendation from that lab, you need to ask the PI or mentor of that lab to write you a letter of recommendation, even if you feel like you didn't have a great deal of contact with them. They will work with the graduate student to write a letter that definitely reflects your contribution to the lab that summer. And having that letter come from a professor or an assistant or associate professor will be much more meaningful and more valued by an admissions committee. A final note about letters of recommendation on this slide is be sure that you are the one who follows up on your application and that all of your letter references are there. And keep in mind that a poor letter in this competitive age is very bad for an application. Every aspect of your application will be carefully scrutinized. Once you've decided on who your recommenders will be, then you have to still provide them some additional information. You should send them or give them your CV, personal statement. You should give them copies of your transcript. You should send them a copy of your personal essay that you're including in your application, even if it's just a draft. And if your research experience is not included in that personal essay, be sure to give them some bullet point outlines of the research experiences that you have been involved with. And you always should give an opportunity for any faculty member that you ask for a letter to say no. It's better to give them an opportunity to say no than to have someone write an average letter of recommendation for you. Once you've given them all of those materials, you should also try and meet with them and talk to them, emphasize that you need a very strong, detailed, supportive letter, and then make sure, most of all, that you give them time to prepare an excellent letter. And so, in my mind, a minimum of 1 month should be allowed between the time you hand them all of the materials they will need and that letter is due. Know that you will likely be asking the same references for many, many letters to different institutions. And don't worry too much about that, because once the original letter is written, they will be able to quickly change the title, the name of the school in it, and send that same letter for your other applications. And don't forget to follow up and make sure that all of the letters that you requested were submitted. Each of you, when you make an online application to an institution, will likely have an opportunity to always log back into that and check if all of your materials have been received. No one else will be doing that. You will need to do that for each application. Okay, so let's say you've applied and now you have been offered some interviews. What will that look like? You will want to prepare for the interview, just like you've taken time to gain research experience and you've created a really strong application. You want to be well prepared at your interview. As you're heading to an institution, know your audience. Read about the program that you will be visiting, know about the faculty members and the research that they're doing at some level, and then when you have an opportunity to say who you would like to meet, definitely voice an opinion on that. And in most programs, you'll know in advance of your visit who you will be interviewing with. And so you should look them up, read a bit about their research, think about how their research might relate to what you have done in the past. It's very impressive when students ask questions during their interview. And so you should ask questions, not only about the science, but this is your opportunity to ask questions about how a program is run and what happens to their students after they graduate. In addition to knowing your audience, you have to be ready to talk about your strong case for being a good match for that particular program. So it's a bit of salesmanship there. You'll want to be able to talk about research that you've done and where that research could go in the future. You want to be able to, just as you did it in your essay, mention what you think you'd like to do in the future. And then you want to be able to say, why did you apply to this program at this particular institution? And here, the more specific that you can be, the more of a great impression that makes on an admissions committee. There's a bit more you should think about during the interview. Know that anything you wrote in your application is fair game for discussion during your interview weekend. So reread your application before you visit the school, and remember what it is you highlighted. You may have written your personal statement in October of the year before, and you may be interviewing in March. So don't count on your memory to remember what it is that you said you were particularly interested in at that institution or what your career goals were. Again, you may have an opportunity to say who you would like to meet. And so make sure you take that opportunity and know that asking questions is very important. They will ask questions of you, and you should ask questions of them as well. Finally, how should you dress? Well, you should dress business casual, which for ladies and gentlemen are like business slacks with a nice top. Ladies can wear dresses, business casual as you might expect at a business office. Science itself, scientists dress in a much more relaxed manner, but you again are making an impression while you are on this interview weekend, and so you want to dress appropriately. You also want to communicate appropriately, somewhat formal yet friendly, and you want to definitely be on your toes at all times. You can relax, but you should remember that at the school you're visiting, the students and the faculty you meet will be evaluating you throughout your time on that campus. You should also be evaluating them. They will be looking and thinking in their head, is this applicant a good fit for our program and for the research that we do? And you should be thinking the same thing. Okay, so let's say now you've interviewed and you've gotten accepted into a program and you picked a program. Now it's time to start your PhD. What will that look like? Well, in your first year or your first 2 years, much of your time will be spent doing coursework, and this coursework will lay the academic foundation for the research that you do in the years to follow. It will also teach you theory and how to apply that theory to scientific questions. Your first year, you will also be busy doing rotations through different laboratories and picking the lab, the science, and the mentor that you believe is the one that will be the best fit for you to receive excellent PhD training. At the end of either your first or your second year, you will select a mentor. Some of you who are in umbrella programs will be selecting a program, and then those important decisions will be made. And you will take a qualifying exam, which for the first time in your scientific life will give you an opportunity to come up with a detailed research plan and have faculty question you on it. It's a big step towards becoming an independent research scientist. Once that's through, what's happening in years 3, 4, and 5? Well, during those years, you are doing the research that will make up your thesis and your defense will it happen once that story is complete. You, of course, also will be working on your communication skills. You will be writing about your research. You will be presenting your research. And you will also be exploring throughout that time what career path you're planning to pursue and gaining through professional development all of the skills that you will need to be successful in the next phase of your training. So where can you find more information about what was discussed today? Well, the 3 websites here will definitely provide you with more detailed information on PhDs, MD PhDs, and then training that happens at all levels at the NIH. So definitely you'll be able to revisit this webinar, and you can look at those websites at your leisure. Another way to find information is to reach out to people who have gone before you, who could be role models for you, other scientists. And then people who care about you, directors and mentors of your summer programs, any program that you're part of as an undergraduate or a postdoc, professors that you have worked with or people above them or department chairs. Definitely reach out to current graduate and MD PhD students. They often are fantastic sources of experience because they're living that experience right now. Postdoctoral trainees as well have just become trained as a PhD. You should also look to career advising officers and then PhD program directors and administrators of programs that you are either applying to or that you eventually join. And I believe that brings us to the end of our slide.
As you can see, the PhD application process requires preparation and planning. We have gone over many details about the timeline. We have identifying different schools and programs, the elements of the personal statement, the important things about the letters of recommendation, and of course the interview. All of these slides will be available to you on the National Research Mentoring Network website very shortly, so that you can go over these again as you start to prepare your PhD applications. Now we have some time to answer your questions. So please continue to type in your questions and we'll answer as many as possible. So let's start with a question that we get very frequently. Am I ready to apply to PhD programs with only one summer program as research experience? Dr. Wright, can you help us answer that question?
Are you ready to apply with one summer experience? I would say probably not. Most schools are looking for more than one summer or an extended experience at your undergraduate institution. So I think if you are graduating with only one summer experience, you might want to consider either working for a year or two or pursuing a post-bac or master's program to get a little bit more experience before you apply to a PhD program.
Okay, I think that's very good advice. We have some questions about the GREs. Is there a minimum score, and how many times should I take the GREs to obtain a competitive score? Dr. Street?
That is a question we get a lot, and I think it's an excellent question. So some schools have minimum scores, others do not. And you will want to look at the schools you're applying to, see if they have a minimum, and you should also find out on their website or by an email what their average entering student's GRE score is, and that will help you gauge, is this a school where I will be a competitive applicant? As to the number of times that you should take the GRE, my institution does not look negatively upon someone taking it twice or even 3 times. Beyond that, I think the chances of your score improving dramatically are slim. And so my best advice would be study in advance of the first time and hopefully only take it one time. It is an expensive exam.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question about the recommendations. So I've had 2 research experiences. Who can be my third recommender? And there's a related question, which is a letter from a career counselor okay as a letter of recommendation? Dr. Street?
So definitely you are wise to realize that you would like a letter from each of your research experiences, so that is excellent. So your third one could be a faculty member who has taught you in many advanced level classes. That would be a good letter of recommendation, especially if you have a relationship with that person and they know of your interest as well as research experiences you have been involved with. As to a career counselor, I would say if I had to line up a letter from that source, it would fall fairly further down the list, unless that person is someone that you have had a multi-year relationship with and they have something unique and original to add to your letter that wouldn't simply be information that you shared with them. And so I would say that I would be less excited to read that letter as an admissions committee member, because I would think at first glance, this person may not be able to tell me about this person's ability to be a scientist.
Okay, we have some questions about identifying the right PhD program. How can I find listings of PhD programs, and how much time should I devote to looking at these programs? Dr. Wright?
Listings of PhD programs. I mean, I think that the AAMC website with the one that ends with /PhD has listings of the ones in academic medical centers. Other places where you might find where there are large training opportunity to go to the, I always tell students to go to the NIH Reporter website and look for training grants for particular disciplines. So if you are interested in cancer research, for example, you might be able to find where there are places where there are training grants in cancer, which would tell you where there are a large number of faculty who are doing research in particular areas. Other suggestions from you two?
You could also look at U.S. News World Reports, where they rank institutions that train people in PhDs. That is a resource. You wouldn't necessarily have to look at the rankings, but it would give you a very long list of schools, and you could do your own research and find the ones that appeal to you. That's another possibility.
Yeah. And to the question about how much time should be devoted to looking at these programs and identifying the programs, I think we should remind everyone that a PhD program is a very long program. You're going to be there for a while, usually at least 5 years, and you want to make sure that the program is right for you, that it fits your interests, that it's in the right geographic area, and that it has the kind of training that you are looking for. So it is really a worthwhile investment in your time to spend the right amount of time looking at all these programs. Okay, so we have another question about the kinds of conferences that students should be attending while they're getting ready for a PhD program. Dr. Wright, do you want to say something about what kinds of conferences people should be looking for?
Sure. There are two really large conferences for undergraduate students that I'm aware of that I go to every year. One is called ABRCAMS and one is called SACNAS. ABRCAMS is the annual biomedical research conference for minority students, and SACNAS is from the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. Both of these conferences welcome students from all over the nation and are not exclusionary at all to come and give their research, as well as have workshops for undergraduate students to talk about preparing for graduate school and how to write personal statements, and a whole bunch of other, nice keynote speakers who come and talk about their research who are nationally recognized people. Other sources might be the Council on Undergraduate Research, which has a website, www.cur.org, which offers conferences for undergraduate students that you can apply to go to. And as well, many states have an Academy of Sciences. So we have a South Carolina Academy of Sciences that hosts an annual research conference for undergraduate students in the state to come and give their research. So there are a variety of opportunities from sort of the local level to the national level to go and give research that are venues that are welcoming to undergraduate students.
Yes, those are great suggestions. Thank you to the person who wrote in that one of the links on the slides is not working. Before we post the slides, we will check all the links and make sure that everything is working for you. Okay, so we have another question about the letters of recommendation. Some applications actually ask a lot of specific questions this is for the personal statement. Some applications actually have specific questions. Should I be answering these questions in the personal statement, or should I follow the guidelines that you suggested, Dr. Street?
That is a great question. I would say both. I think you should start out by answering the specific questions that are being asked. Sometimes particular applications feel like answers to those questions will help them decide which students are the best match for their program. So I would not recommend avoiding those questions. But I do think that it is important that you tell any stories that are unique to you and that you talk about your research. And so if they don't specifically ask those, I would find an opportunity to weave them into an answer to a specific question that they ask.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful advice. One student asked whether or not it's possible to pursue a PhD program part-time. And I will answer that by saying, to my knowledge, I do not know of a biomedical PhD program that can be pursued part-time. Working in the lab is really much more than a full-time experience, as you have learned from all of your summer and other research experiences. And remember that the PhD is granted not for the coursework that you do early in the PhD program, but for the new discoveries that you make while you are working in the laboratory. And it takes a long time, hard work, and persistence to make those discoveries. And that's the reason a PhD program is not part-time. That's also the reason that biomedical PhD programs are supported by tuition remission, and that allows the student to pursue the PhD without worrying about supporting himself or herself. And that's the reason that PhD programs provide stipends. So we have another question about the personal statement. I think that's really important. If I've had personal difficulties or academic difficulties, should I include that in my personal statement? Dr. Street?
Absolutely. That is an excellent question. I always say to students, if you have something that you consider a pink flag or a concern in your application, you should give some explanation as to why that occurred. So let's say, for example, you have a GPA that's like a 2.9. That doesn't mean you can't apply to graduate school, especially if there were extenuating circumstances. Perhaps you had one really bad semester because you were in a car accident and had to drop out of school. Or perhaps you had to work the entire time that you were an undergraduate to support yourself and perhaps even your family. Or perhaps one semester you got mono, or whatever the circumstances are. It's much better to explain to the admissions committee what it is that impacted your grades than allowing them to guess. Another thing that is very good to explain is perhaps you started out with a low GPA and then it kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Maybe the transition to college was a rough one for you. Maybe you started in a major that didn't appeal to you. Any insights that you can give to an unusual circumstance in your application should definitely be described. You shouldn't think of it as making an excuse. You're just informing the people who are reading about your story so they will better understand where you are at this point in time.
Great. We have a question from someone who's been out of the university for a while and wants to know how is the best way to prepare to go back and apply for a PhD program. Dr. Wright?
There are, as I mentioned, a couple of pathways to pursue to sort of get back into the swing of things, I think. One might be to pursue a master's program that would allow you to get a taste of graduate work and show that you can do the coursework and have more research experience before you apply to a PhD program. The other might be to consider getting a job in a laboratory, so doing hypothesis-driven research as a paid technician, and maybe taking some post-bac coursework while you're at whatever place you are. Usually you're at a university. You could take a couple of classes while you're working and get back into the swing of things that way. So I think there's several ways to go back, but I would think that you would need to get back into research and take some coursework again to re-prepare.
Dr. Street, any other insights?
No, I think that's a really good response from Dr. Wright, because sometimes it isn't just being out of school. If you've been out of science, you have to refresh those skills and show the admissions committee that you are able to succeed now.
Yes, and to that point, we have many applications from students who did not necessarily start out as science majors, but may have been school athletes, may have been in the arts, and then have decided that they would like to pursue science as a career. And in order to do that, they have gone back to school. Some have earned additional degrees with an emphasis in science, but most importantly, have spent some time in a research lab to acquire the experience and the understanding of what it's like to be doing science and what being in a lab requires. So no door is ever closed, but it will take some preparation. Okay, so we have another question about the application process. How many programs should I apply to? So this is, of course, very personal, but Dr. Wright, perhaps you can offer a ballpark estimate?
I mean, obviously, there's no right answer to that question, but I would say, you know, a good handful, maybe 5, up to 10, depending on, you know, your personal circumstances. But at least several. I mean, to you know, to make sure that you have maybe a couple of reach schools where you know you're not sure that you would be competitive, and then some that you're more comfortable that you probably meet their admissions requirements and the kind of student that they're taking. But definitely apply to more than one. Don't ever put all of your eggs in one basket.
That's good advice. Dr. Street?
No, I would agree. I used to say 6 schools, now I say 10. Mm-hmm. And the reason is most schools are taking fewer students, so it's more competitive. So you have to cast your net wider. And as Dr. Wright said, figure out of your top 10 or 15 schools what their average student looks like as far as GPA and GRE. And then make sure you include some schools that you apply to where your numbers look as good or better as the class that they accepted the year before.
Yes, I think that's very good advice, and I think one important thing that everyone should remember is that many schools offer a fee waiver, so you should not be shy about writing to the school and seeing if you are eligible for a fee waiver, and some schools do not have an application fee, so that will help. Also, we also recommend 10 schools. So I think that's important advice. So I think we're coming to the end of our program now. As I mentioned earlier, all of these slides will be available to you on the National Research Mentoring website, so you'll be able to go through them at your leisure and go over the important points. I hope that we've been able to give you the framework for a successful PhD application, and we all look forward to reading your applications to our programs in the near future. We wish you the best of luck. Goodbye.
Bye. I thought that went great.
Are we exited?